When I first moved into Maple Creek Estates, I didn't think much about the small, overgrown strip of land located between my backyard fence and the community walking trail. It was a forgotten patch of earth, maybe 15 feet wide and stretching along the entire rear edge of my property. Most neighbors assumed it was part of the HOA's community green space, untouched, unmanaged, and left to nature. The Homeowners Association rarely mentioned it, and no one seemed to care about it. But then came Karen. Karen didn't just move into the neighborhood. She arrived with opinions, authority issues, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Within a month, she became the head of the HOA board. She loved rules, control, and telling people when they were violating community standards. At first, it was small things. Someone's flower bed wasn't uniform, a mailbox was slightly off, shade, or a car was parked too close to the curb. People whispered, rolled their eyes, complained quietly, but no one challenged her. That was the atmosphere Karen thrived in. One day I came home and noticed construction happening behind my property. Trucks, contractors, lumber, and concrete bags were stacked on the abandoned strip of land. Curious, I walked over and asked one of the workers what they were building. "A pool house," he replied simply. "For the HOA president." She gave us the plot plan. My jaw nearly dropped. Karen was building a private pool house on land that wasn't even behind her house. It was behind mine. That night, during the HOA meeting, Karen announced with a bold grin, "Since the land was unclaimed, and I have taken responsibility for improving it, it will now serve as part of my property. I'm adding value to the community." Neighbors looked confused. Some whispered. A few nodded only because they feared crossing her. I raised my hand and asked, "Do you own that land?" She smiled like someone who thought they were the smartest person in the room. "It was abandoned," she said, "so I claimed it." Something about her certainty didn't sit right with me. After the meeting, I went home and started digging through old property records stored in a dusty file box that came with my house when I purchased it. And there it was, a 20-year-old deed, recorded and legally binding, clearly marking that abandoned strip of land as part of my property. Karen hadn't just overstepped. She had built on my land, presenting the deed. The next morning, I stood on my patio staring at the construction site behind my fence. The workers were framing the pool house walls now, sturdy lumber, insulation piles, and concrete footers already poured. This wasn't a backyard shed or temporary cabana. This was a full-scale, permanent structure with plumbing, electrical, and roofing plans. Every hammer strike felt like someone pounding directly on my nerves. The deed I found the night before wasn't vague or outdated. It was a clearly filed property boundary deed addendum, executed 20 years earlier, when the previous owners had negotiated an agreement with the county. The land was originally meant for a walking trail extension that never happened. The county officially transferred ownership to the lot, my lot. It had been legally part of this property for decades. The HOA had simply forgotten, and no one bothered to maintain the records. I photocopied the deed, highlighted the relevant boundary descriptions, and printed a copy of the county plot map from the registrar's office. I was calm, prepared, the opposite of Karen. That evening, I attended the HOA's next scheduled meeting in the clubhouse. Karen sat at the center table like a judge presiding over trial, with her arms crossed and chin up. A few board members flanked her, clearly just there for appearances. As I walked in, I saw several neighbors glance at me knowingly. Word travels fast. When the floor opened to homeowner concerns, I stood. "I'd like to discuss the construction behind my house," I said steadily. Karen immediately cut in. "That land is HOA property. The improvement is for community benefit. We've gone over this." I placed the deed copy on the table. "This document says otherwise." The room went still. The board members leaned forward. Karen hesitated, that tight smile faltering just slightly. I handed out copies of the deed and plot map to the table and a few neighbors nearby. The legal lines were unmistakable. The strip of land was clearly labeled within my parcel boundaries. Karen cleared her throat, trying to regain control. "This must be a clerical error. It's outdated. It's clearly not valid anymore." But one of the board members, a quiet man named Alex who rarely spoke, adjusted his glasses and said, "This is recorded with the county. This is valid." The tension was now thick enough to cut. I turned to Karen. "You built a structure, without my permission, on my property. That's trespassing and illegal construction." Karen's face flushed. "We'll review it," she snapped. Meeting adjourned. But I wasn't leaving it there. Not now. I had proof. And Karen had just stepped into a legal disaster of her own creation. The HOA panic and the escalation. The next 48 hours felt like watching a slow-motion unraveling of someone who had finally been challenged and didn't know how to cope. The very next morning, Karen was in my backyard, on my land, marching back and forth with a tape measure, a clipboard, and a scowl that could curdle fresh milk. I stepped outside and simply said, "You're trespassing." Her jaw tightened. "This situation," she said, refusing to look at me directly, "is being reviewed by the HOA legal committee." "There is no HOA legal committee," I reminded her. "It's just you and your email account." Her silence confirmed that she knew I was right. She finally huffed and walked away, heels stabbing the soft ground with each furious step. But the situation was no longer a neighborhood dispute. It was a legal one. I scheduled a consultation with a property attorney. I brought the deed, the maps, and photos of the construction. The attorney didn't even need 5 minutes to assess the situation. She built a structure knowingly or unknowingly on land that is legally yours. This is a textbook case of encroachment. You can force removal, demand damages, and report the HOA for failure to maintain accurate records. And in this case, he tapped the file. You have the upper hand. Meanwhile, Karen was doing damage control. She called an emergency HOA meeting. This alone was unusual. Normally, she relished following strict bylaws. But desperation makes people skip their own rules. The clubhouse was packed. Neighbors who rarely attended. Meetings showed up just to watch. What they could sense was the biggest scandal Maple Creek Estates had ever seen. Karen stood before everyone, wearing that forced smile again. Only now it was cracking. "There appears to be some confusion regarding property boundaries," she began. "The HOA is currently working to resolve the matter in a way that benefits the entire community." I stood up. "There is no confusion," I said clearly. "The county records show that land is mine. The board has verified it. The structure must be removed." Karen's voice shook slightly. "If we remove the pool house, there will be costs. Upkeep funds, landscaping repairs." Alex, the quiet board member, interrupted. "No, the HOA didn't authorize construction. You did. Any costs should be your responsibility personally." A collective gasp moved through the room. Karen's face drained of color. She tried one more time to assert authority. "You're all being dramatic. I've worked hard to improve this neighborhood." But the room wasn't on her side anymore. They had finally seen her. Not a leader, not a protector of community standards, but someone who took what wasn't hers and expected everyone to accept it. The tide had turned. The removal and the aftermath. Once the truth was in the open, everything moved quickly. Karen tried to slow it down. Of course, emails, messages, even printed. Notices placed in mailboxes, claiming that the dispute was under review. But the board, now no longer intimidated by her presence, voted to suspend her HOA authority until the matter was resolved. That suspension meant something critical. She had no power to approve expenditures, policies, or construction. Her influence evaporated overnight. The contractors were the first to back out. When they learned the land belonged to me, not the HOA, and definitely not Karen, they refused to continue work without proper legal authorization. The site sat quiet for days, half-built walls baking under the sun. The structure looked awkward now, like a monument to arrogance. Legally, I had two options. 1. Allow the structure to stay, negotiate an easement, and potentially sell part of my land. 2. Demand full removal and restoration. I chose the second. Not out of spite, though. I would be lying if I said there was no satisfaction, but because my property value, privacy, and legal rights mattered. And no one was going to build something on my land and then act like I should be grateful. My attorney filed a formal cease and desist order, followed by an encroachment removal demand. Karen was personally responsible for all costs, and the HOA was explicitly excluded from financial liability. The law was clear. The board voted unanimously to enforce the removal. On the morning the demolition crew arrived, neighbors gathered quietly, some watching from driveways, others from porch steps. Karen was there too, arms crossed, eyes red, face twisted with disbelief and humiliation. She tried pleading with the crew. She tried claiming legal appeals were pending. She even threatened to call the police. But everyone knew there was no more power behind her voice. The pool house came down piece by piece. Lumber stacked, concrete broken, foundation jackhammered. The buzzing of saws and the thud of debris landing in dumpsters echoed across Maple Creek Estates. When the final wall fell, you could feel the collective exhale of an entire neighborhood. Over the next week, the ground was regraded, reseeded, and restored. The land was mine again, quiet, simple, just as it had been before. The HOA held a special election shortly after. Karen didn't run. She didn't attend. She soon put her house on the market, claiming she was tired of dealing with petty neighbors. Some felt bad for her. Others said justice had been served. As for me, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. Boundaries aren't just lines on property maps. They are lines of respect. And when someone crosses them, sometimes you have to stand your ground.